Hi everyone. So for my individual case study, I had chapter 5, case 15, and it was called The Politics of Pink, Susan G. Komen for the Cure Steps into Partisan Minifields. So just some background information on the actual case itself. Susan G. Komen died at the age of 36 from breast cancer, and at that time she had asked her sister, Nancy Brinker, to promise to find a cure for this horrible disease. In 1982, Brinker created Susan G. Komen for a Cure, a nonprofit foundation that raised more than $2.2 billion to fund breast cancer research and more. Before the controversy, this remained as one of the top nonprofit brands according to Harris Poll. Brinker had also served as Komen's chief at this time since 2009. For many years, Komen provided grants to Planned Parenthood. They provided nearly 170,000 clinical breast exams that resulted in 6,400 referrals for mammograms. In 2011, Komen gave them $680,000 to fund clinical breast exams, and over a period of 20 years, they had then given them $9 million to Planned Parenthood. Komen adopted a new policy on November 29, 2011, that prohibited grants to organizations under investigation. Planned Parenthood happened to be the only organization that was affected by this change, and in that case, they requested a meeting with Komen's board immediately, and Komen's board ignored it, and they decided that they were going to defend their new policy in a response letter, and that was it. So here is just a couple of things from the timeline. This resulted in there being a 3-day response from Komen in regards to the controversy. So day 1 was February 1st, 2012, and politicians and organizations issued statements defending or attacking Komen's actions. Komen issued a statement later that day on their Facebook page, basically just defending the policy, but didn't show any regret or remorse. They then released a similar statement through the Business Wire around 10 p.m. that day. Komen then clarified the new policy with a YouTube video that she posted, and she also explained that they were trying to focus on higher impact programs. The new policy favored organizations that went beyond clinical breast examinations and provided mammogram services, and they knew that Planned Parenthood services did not complete those things. Brinker also denied the new policy being political in any way. The news release was released later that day, not mentioning organizations under investigation being affected by this or the accusations under political pressure. Here is some more from the timeline. So this is day 2, February 2nd, 2012. Social media was active against Komen at this point, and there were people tripling their usual donation to Planned Parenthood. Hackers proceeded to hack Komen's website and change the rating to help us run over the poor. They changed the rating to help us run over poor women on our way to the bank. People started to question the earnings of Brinker and how much was going to funding and how much she was getting as a salary. Other Planned Parenthoods were still being funded. They provided only breast cancer screening services in the area. While the president of Planned Parenthood made the rounds, Brinker went on her first appearance defending them. She stated that Komen was not defunding Planned Parenthood and they were not being political. U.S. Senator Frank Lautenberg and Patty Murray and 24 other senators signed a worded letter urging them to reverse the decision. The Washington Times themselves, which is a conservative newspaper, reported that the Family Research Council asked if supporters of Planned Parenthood could send thank you emails and stuff like that. There was one report that stated a top Komen official resigned after the new policy was released, and Kathy Plesser, also a Manhattan radiologist on the medical advisory board of Komen's New York chapter, announced plans to resign unless Komen revised the decision. So day 3 of the timeline, February 3rd, 2012, had that around 11 a.m. Komen issued an apology through a news release. They stated what the purpose was for the new policy and how they are now amending their criteria so that politics has no place in the grant process. They made a Facebook post as well, getting right to the point, and the Planned Parenthood CEO Richards issued a statement explaining how they were to continue to work with Planned Parenthood in order to help women. So some additional information about the case. In 2010, KFC conducted a 6-week fundraising and awareness campaign for Komen's awareness as well. The campaign raised $4.2 million but was criticized along the way. because of the food's fattening content. Planned Parenthood also received more than $3 million in contributions and attracted 30,000 donors in 3 days when the new policy was released. And finally, this controversy caused multiple resignations in different positions, as well as decreasing in fundraising events and donations. So just some other organizations that were involved in the case. So Susan G. Komen for the Cure was the main, Planned Parenthood also main one, and KFC, the fast food fried chicken restaurant. So the key publics and stakeholders, Planned Parenthood, specifically Brigham, Susan G. Komen for the Cure, U.S. Senator Patricia Murray, U.S. Representative Mike Honda, U.S. Senator Frank Lautenberg, U.S. Senator Patty Murray, all the people that resigned from Komen after the controversy and during it as well. The Washington Times, who sent out the post that the family aspect of Planned Parenthood was asking for emails, and Planned Parenthood, also the CEO, Richards. So the relationship between the organizations and the key publics and stakeholders. So until this incident, Planned Parenthood and Susan G. Komen had a fabulous relationship. Even after the controversy, they had no relationship. I would say through social media, the senators had a great relationship with Planned Parenthood as they were defending them and wanting the same solution. The Washington Times relationship with Komen was good because they were reporting positive information about Komen and the new policy. I would say that people that resigned from Planned Parenthood had a phenomenal relationship with the organization in the beginning, but towards the end they realized that they were obviously promoting an organization that did not have good intentions, which caused them to resign and leave their positions. So the PR process race. So as for research, the case did not exemplify research prior to the incident. However, during the incident, there was some research conducted. The action planning, both organizations plan to make statements and release news releases to defend both of their own sides, with the backup of people defending both their sides as well. The communication, they used YouTube, social media, news outlets, and news releases to release all pieces of crucial information that they wanted the public to know. The evaluation was that the case evaluated the resignations from Planned Parenthood as well as the decline in their fundraising and the donations from donors. So the SWOT analysis, Planned Parenthood's reputation before the incident, the amount of people that they helped, and the donations that they gave out. The final news release stated that they were going to revoke and amend their new policy. Opportunities is to potentially gain a new team to rebrand the organizations, as well as strengthen relationships with donors and the public. They also gain the trust back, as well as connect with the news outlets, which is very important. The weaknesses, the initial new policy they instated, the lack of transparency with their donors, with the public, and Planned Parenthood themselves, because they didn't release a statement that they were embarking on this new policy in the right, correct way. The statement that they released showed no regret and was very defensive. And so for threats, Planned Parenthood suffered from this incident, news releases and videos circulating while not giving thorough information on the new policy or to back it up. So primary organization responses. So as for research, there was none done prior to the incident, but they began to do research that was done within the process. For the outreach, there was interaction conducted between both organizations and media outlets. There was also slight interaction between both organizations themselves. And the defensive response, when they finally did decide to respond, they denied everything that they were accused of, and they had no remorse or regret, and they didn't apologize for anything. Vocal commiseration, towards the end of all the backlash they received, that then they decided to show remorse, and they decided to apologize after receiving all the backlash from news media outlets and all the public and rectifying behavior, they corrected their actions, tried to move on from this as well. Strategic inaction, which was they were silent throughout the process for a while and didn't make a thorough statement until they received backlash from the public and the news outlets. So, organizational media tactics. There were multiple organizational media tactics. For example, both organizations used different social media platforms. They both used Facebook and their websites to get the news across. Coleman also used YouTube to produce a video explaining the new policy, as well as defending everything she was accused of. News media tactics. Both organizations used news releases to release statements on both ends and news outlets such as the Washington Times, and they also promoted positive information for Planned Parenthood. The timing between the incident and the response. So, timing is obviously everything in cases like this, and when the incident started and it came out that Planned Parenthood initiated the new policy, there was not much time between then and when the public saw it on news outlets and social media. Although the organization released statements in regards to their new policy, they let more than enough time go by and they didn't properly address it with the thorough information they needed to. I don't think that silence was effective at all during this. I think it hurt them much more, and their reputation was partially tarnished because of how silent they stayed until the end of the situation. So, the use of language in messages. So, there were written elements, spoken elements, and visual elements. There was factual information on both ends, and Planned Parenthood attempted to use persuasive texts when they were defending themselves. Planned Parenthood also released facts about the amount of donations they received, and Coleman stated the facts in regards to the mission and the percentage of what went into each aspect. Coleman also stated in the beginning of the case how much they provided for breast clinics and women who could not afford treatment. There was no humor involved in this. I would say there was definitely shock on both ends. Coleman never released their initial policy in the right way, and when Planned Parenthood realized they weren't going to be working with them anymore, and Coleman was being accused of political aspects with the grant process, they were shocked as well. There was offense on both ends, and as they both thought that they were correct in the situation, but specifically on Planned Parenthood, because the two organizations had a good relationship all beforehand. Coleman stated that they were not defunding Planned Parenthood, that 3 clinics had been approved for funding in 2012, and they might even be eligible for the future. And in this case, it did not list a spokesperson. However, the CEO and the president both spoke on the behalves of both of their own organizations. And as for visual elements, there were not any that were promoted to the public. This case focused, specifically on news, advertisement, and using facts on social media platforms to promote what was going on. So the ethical and legal issues in the case. This case had none of the above involved except for 2. Coleman did the opposite of most of these ethical and legal issues, and when it came to how they handled themselves, there was no open honesty or consideration for the public or the other organizations involved. The trust of clients and donors was lost, which caused there to be no respect for the organization. From the way they handled this case, the lack of transparency caused a lack of trust from Coleman to its donors, the media, and their prior loyal partner, Planned Parenthood. As for independence, they were accountable for their actions at the end after all the news release and social media platforms were against them. They had finally released a new statement apologizing and fixing their mistakes by amending the policy and continuing their grants for Planned Parenthood and safeguarding confidences. Although they handled this case horribly, there was no breach of client information, and everything that was listed in the case was allowed to be there. Successes and failures. So as I was reading the case, I did realize that it could gain so much attention. I didn't realize that they could gain so much attention from one choice. I've learned that although there were plenty of failures throughout the case, Coleman did do the right thing in the end. And personally, I don't think it was for the right reasons, but Planned Parenthood did get what they wanted, and I learned it's important to be transparent with the public, news outlets, and social media during times like this. Something that also stuck in my head was how hard Planned Parenthood fought for what they thought was right, how many times they used different media outlets to gain coverage for the story and for the situation so that they could get what they wanted in the end. And overall, as small as a choice can tarnish a company or an organization's reputation, and that always has to be taken into consideration. So our team client is United Airlines, and currently there is nothing going on in regards to a scandal with them, but in September of 2021, they were fined for keeping passengers on planes for long hours and in a violation of federal rules. United disagreed with these rules, but the spokesperson, Charles Hubbard, explained that they were taking measures to fix lengthy delays as well as develop a system so people could say what airport they could go to if there was bad weather. And I thought that this could easily happen in the future again if United does not continue to improve these little things. So I would recommend them taking extra measures in order to make sure the problem is fixed. And however, if they cannot fix the problem, they should compensate by giving customers some sort of discount or a free flight. And yeah. So here are my discussion questions. One is just, how would you have handled the situation if you were involved with Komen's organization at the time of the new policy being established? Do you think that Planned Parenthood did the right thing by reaccepting the partnership with them in the end? And do you think that Komen will ever be able to fully recover their reputation after this incident? And here are my references. Thank you so much for listening.